I call the member for Newtown.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise on behalf of the Greens to contribute to this debate on the Terrorism and Other Legislation Bill 2025 and say that I do so with a heavy heart. Just over a week ago, 2 terrorists engaged in a horrific act of violence, a mass shooting at Bondi. I make this contribution in this chamber on behalf of the Greens in the Legislative Assembly, myself, the member for Newtown, and the members for Ballina and Balmain. And we wish to express our collective and heartfelt sympathy to all those who were there and the loved ones of those impacted by this tragedy. While there will be time later in this extraordinary parliamentary sitting to contribute in a more fulsome way to the condolence motion, which I intend to do, for those who lost their lives, it is clear that targeting of the Jewish community during what should have been a time of celebration, peace and connection is beyond words. The loss of life is so deeply tragic, and the Greens condemn this blatant act of anti-Semitism and the mass shooting in our city. How a person, indeed, how a community, how a government or how a parliament responds to a crisis of this magnitude speaks volumes. In the past weeks, stories of courage of those in our community who risked everything to protect others have filled us with a sense of hope and connection in such a time of despair. On the other hand, the bill before us today risks doing the exact opposite. By bundling much-needed gun reforms in response to a mass shooting with moves to further constrain the right to peaceful protest here in New South Wales, somehow conflating the latter with a hate-filled act of terror is truly worrying. That the New South Wales Labor government has chosen to put all of the reforms together is disappointing. It is not in the interests of our democracy nor our society, and it will not help heal the pain and fissures in our communities. Rather, it will risk further inflaming them. We must not let this horrifying act of hatred and violence fuel further hatred and violence. No matter how much some might wish to insulate our communities from global events, we must recognise that the very definition of being a successful multicultural society means that we will be inevitably connected with what is happening around the world. Those events will directly impact us. We cannot ignore them, we cannot deny them, and we cannot shy away from them. The Premier has said that he wants this to be a summer of peace, and we share that hope for us in Sydney and for people around the globe. But we know that there can be no real peace without justice. You cannot force peace. As someone who worked with Amnesty International for many years, I know that silencing dissent does not work. Eventually, the people will rise up in the face of draconian laws. They will rise up when their material needs are not being met. Real peace happens when there is no need for communities to dissent because there is no injustice. Peace comes from respect, equality and dignity for all people. Peace comes from when people have all of their civil liberties and their human rights protected and promoted. Removing the collective rights of people to engage in non-violent, peaceful protest in the state of New South Wales is a very disappointing use of this tragic event. The Greens have always been committed to human rights and to peace. We are committed to fostering care, compassion and connection in our communities. And we know that in order to do this, we need to empower and enable non-violent collective action, not outlaw it. The bill being debated here just a week after the mass shooting at Bondi and a few days before Christmas brings together 4 areas of reform: strengthening gun laws, expansion of the prohibition of the public display of prohibited terrorist symbols, broadening police powers to require a person to remove a face covering during a public assembly, and the establishment of a scheme for public assembly restriction declarations giving power to police and police minister to prevent authorised protests for a period of time of up to 90 days after a declared terrorist event. The Greens absolutely support the reforms contained in this bill as they relate to guns and the prohibition of the public display of prohibited terrorist symbols. However, we cannot accept the disappointing overreach when it comes to the increased police powers that would see the rights of peaceful members of our community engaging in public assemblies further eroded. And we hold grave concerns for the impact on members of our community with increased powers for police to insist on the removal of face coverings. The right to peaceful protest is a cornerstone of a healthy democracy. It sets a dangerous precedent to curtail that right and to hand power over to the police and the government of the day to say how and when people can gather to express their collective views. Australia has a proud history of peaceful protest movements for reconciliation, for marriage equality, for workers' rights, for women's rights, for First Nations justice, and indeed for peace. Movements that are responsible for many of the core things that we have come to value in our society. It is true that over the last 2 years, we have seen massive rallies here and around the world in response to the genocide in Gaza and deaths of innocent men, women, and children. And it is within our rights in a democratic society to peacefully gather and say that we do not want to see these atrocities taking place. It is important to call out those who seek to blame Sydney-siders who have engaged in peaceful protests opposing a genocide for the abhorrent antisemitic actions of 2 violent mass murdering men in Bondi. Peaceful protest is not what breeds hate. Peaceful protest helps ensure our democracy is functioning as it should. We do not want to see another knee-jerk response that seeks to crack down on peaceful protest. We do not want more draconian laws rushed through our parliament. We know that people are scared, that people are hurting, that everyone wants to do something to make this horror disappear and ensure that it never happens again. It is understandable that decisive action feels reassuring at the moment. However, what we are passing here today will not keep any of us safer. It might give some people false hope or fleeting comfort, but it will prevent many others from connecting with community and speaking out on the trauma and injustice that they have and continue to experience. In the past 24 hours, an anti-immigration rally was allowed in our city. In the last months, a neo-Nazi rally was held outside this very building, while police watched on. And yet peaceful activists taking a stand against a genocide are met with misinformation, accusations, and police violence. Who gets to gather? Who gets to protest? Who decides what is acceptable? It is unacceptable that people who gathered peacefully to exercise their right to protest are now being blamed for the horrific actions of 2 deranged, radicalised, hate-filled men with guns. I will now turn briefly to the gun reforms in this bill. Everyone living in Australia has the right to be free from violence in all its forms, and that includes gun violence. Shockingly, it has been revealed that 2 individuals who allegedly committed the antisemitic mass shooting on Sunday had access to legally licensed firearms. While Australia is often held up as a leader in gun violence prevention, this attack has highlighted significant loopholes that allow dangerous individuals to possess multiple high-powered weapons. We also know that the number of guns owned by individuals in New South Wales is far too high and leaves us open to increased risk. Our gun laws must be strengthened to help prevent similar atrocities in the future. The Greens support the 10-point plan of the Australian Gun Safety Alliance, who are Australia's leading public health, community safety and firearm prevention organisation. This includes further restriction on the high capacity of firearms, no metropolitan home storage for non-occupational firearms, strict limits on the number of firearms, prohibition on children using firearms, robust regular renewals of firearm licences, removal of recreational hunting as a genuine reason to obtain a firearm licence, an end to unlicensed shooting at ranges, and a total ban on political donations from the gun lobby in New South Wales. Speaker, if I can seek a brief extension of time.
Member seeks an extension of time. All of that opinion say aye. Those against no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Thank you, Speaker. The Greens want to see stronger gun laws, and we are committed to evidence-backed gun reform that will prevent any future atrocities. Parliament has been recalled urgently as a result of the horrifying acts last week. This means that the final version of this legislation was only available to members this morning, with debate happening on the same day. As such, and to allow for further consultation with the many communities, organisations and experts that intersect with this broad-ranging bill, the Greens will be reserving our position on it in the Legislative Assembly, and will be working with our Greens colleagues in the other place to move significant amendments and engage in more detail in some of the substantive elements of the bill in the upper house. Mass shootings are, by their very design, terrifying. Whether it be a lone actor or two men, what rips at our sense of security and shreds our feeling of safety apart is that they come out of nowhere. If any agency, if any government, if any authority knew it was coming, they would have issued warnings. They would put in place preventative measures. They would take action to protect those at risk. And that's the thing. As much as we crave security, safety, and protection in the face of such horror, such violence, and such tragedy, there is a risk that in the panic to respond, in the attempt to reassure and to reassert some sense of power and control over the evil actions of two individuals, that we lose sight of the path that we need to take in order to increase connection, in order to demonstrate compassion, and in order to show true care. Sunday was a day of reflection, and on that day we reflect on those who lost their lives as a result of horrific violence. Right now, we also need to reflect on what it means for light to overcome darkness. We need to reflect on those who will experience ongoing trauma as a result of the mass shooting in Bondi last week. The pain and impact on the Jewish community of this horrifying antisemitic attack will continue. And we need to reflect on those who will be subjected to vitriol and hate as a result of the responses to it. And we need to reflect on racism, on anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and indeed on white supremacy. What whips it up and what stamps it out? While this is a challenging time for our communities, it does not have to be a dark time for our democracy. The Greens are very disappointed that the Labor government is combining unrelated reforms in the same bill. We won't stand in the way of gun reform, and we will not enable a crackdown on peaceful protest. We express our solidarity and support to all those in our community impacted by this mass shooting. To those in the Jewish community who are grieving and coming to terms with this horror, our hearts go out to you. To all members of our community who long for justice, who long for peace with justice, let us hold each other with care. In these terrifying times, let us continue to use our collective power to make the world a better place for everyone.